Okay, so what I'm going to do in this demo is glue up the little bench. If you don't have fair bit of experience on gluing one of these up or gluing any project up, I would highly recommend doing a dry run. Dry run gives you the opportunity to see if everything's fitting exactly what you want. Also gives you some sort of a dry rehearsal on getting all the clamps where you need to and how you apply pressure and that type of thing. So it's always a good idea to do a dry run on clamping before you wind up committing the glue. Once that glue's on there, we have a limited amount of time of open time with that glue in order to get things completely clamped up in the way we want it. I'm using Titebond 3, so I've got about 15 minutes to work with. If for some reason things don't work quite out the way you want to, I recommend just pulling everything apart, wiping all that glue off, wait till everything dries. Try as best you can to get that sort of dried glue off of any of your sort of glue surfaces. PVA glue does not stick to PVA glue, so you need to get back down to bare wood before that glue will do what it needs to do. So what I've done, I've got a couple sort of buffers here, some pads out of 1/4" MDF. I'm going to keep those on top. That way, as I'm trying to fit everything home, my clamp is not damaging my work surface. So that's important. I still have to clean all this stuff up because my pins and tails are just going to be a little bit proud of both surfaces. So I'll need to clean those up later on. But still, it's a good idea not to sort of have those clamps damage your work pieces. Also, what I've done here, let me see if this works so you can see it. So, as I mentioned, my pins and tails are a little bit proud of where they need to be. So, in order to effectively pull my legs onto my top, I need to push only on my tails. So I've made this little clamping caul out of a piece of scrap pine, and you can see they only press right on the sides of those tails. So now I can clamp this thing together, not allowing sort of my pins to interfere with getting this piece all the way together. I'll also have a couple of clamp blocks for when I get to this point. And these again, I did something similar for the other project, but they're nice heavy blocks of cherry, so kind of nice to keep around for other clamping jobs. I've got my wedges on hand. I am going to use a metal hammer to hit those wedges home. I'm going to explain why I want to use a metal hammer rather than a wood mallet. I have a piece of veneer as my glue stick. Brockler, Woodcraft, they sell these little silicon bristled glue sticks. You can clean them off. The ones I've ever seen people use, they just let the glue build up on them, and I don't know, it's really not doing a whole lot better than a stick of wood at that point anyhow. So either I use my finger, it washes off real well, or I use a piece of small piece of scrap wood or some scrap veneer. Most of the time scrap veneer as my sort of glue stick. So yeah, I'll put a little bit of glue in these areas, maybe I'll put a little bit of glue on an old business card. And that will get me there. So let me go ahead and pull this apart. And as I do this, I want to keep the orientation of all these parts the same. That way I don't have to try to figure out where all these parts fit. And as I start putting it together, and I did move this around, so let's make sure I got this in the right spot. So I've got the one label there, and I think that is one. So that works for that. Okay, I'm gonna move the camera just a little bit. All right, so here I've got my work pieces laid out. Come on now. Here we go. All right. One thing you can do is if you sort of try to help prevent the the glue squeeze out where you don't want it to. Typically we recommend for a lot of the intro or any sort of glue up project is take some blue tape, and you can line the blue tape along the areas where your parts meet. Make sure you don't get it underneath any sort of joinery, because then you'll trap the blue tape and it won't come out. I'm not going to bother doing that because I've already pre-finished these parts. So you've got a couple coats of super blonde shellac, and then I put wax on top of that. So the glue should not stick to the surface. And I'm not worried about forcing the glue into the work surface or the wood, the bare wood. This is hackberry. It's a very open pored wood. If I hadn't pre-finished this or not put down glue, if I were to wipe that glue off with a wet rag or something after I got it glued up, I'd force that glue into the open pores. Finish doesn't generally stick to glue. Certainly stains don't. If I were to color this thing in any way, that stain's not going to adhere to that dried glue. Even clear finishes don't necessarily adhere well to dried glue. You can always see a little bit lighter spot, particularly on darker colored woods. It shows up. I'm not sure how it would show up on this hackberry. I don't generally use hackberry, so I don't have a whole lot of experience using it. But I know from past experience that that glue generally shows up underneath your finish, and then once that happens, you're swearing, and you've got to go back down to bare wood, even below that sort of surface, to get that glue out of there, and then start to refinish. So yeah, be real careful, trying to avoid any sort of that excessive glue squeeze out from your joints if possible. Sometimes we want to see that because it's an indication that we've got enough glue there, and that glue squeezing out is an indication that we've got proper clamp pressure on it. But generally you sort of want to develop a feel for what's the right amount of glue, how much clamp pressure can I get there. I mean, we don't need to put thousands of pounds of clamp pressure on these things. That's really not doing us any good. We want to get enough on there so things stay tight. That glue, those two glue surfaces, have a nice close sort of mating surface, so that glue can actually do what it needs to do. And outside of that, I mean, we don't really have to apply a whole lot of extra pressure. So let me go ahead and show you how I'm going to start doing this. Okay, so yes, I'm going to start with my legs. So the reason I hesitate there for a little bit, I want to get the glue so it kind of pushes into surfaces. Again, keep in mind my glue surfaces are long grain to long grain. I don't have to put glue here or inside here. Basically, the sides of where my tails hit my pins is about the only glue surface I got. That's kind of why it's beneficial to wind up doing, a number of tails and pins rather than just a couple big ones. Because so for example, I've got one big tail in this whole piece. So I've got a glue surface on either side of those tails. If I put two tails in it, now I've doubled my glue surface. I went from 2 to 4 long grain to long grain surfaces. So keep that in mind. On this one, I have 6 tails. They're fairly small. My pins are pretty wide. But that gives me a fair bit of glue surface on the ends. Kind of repeats the pattern in the middle. I don't necessarily have to have as much glue surface in the middle of the panel. The mechanical sort of advantage of doing dovetails will hold a lot of that in, but it's important to have more glue surfaces at the ends of your pieces. All right, so let me go ahead and start with this. No, come on now. All right, glue ball's open now. I'm going to spread that glue, maybe even surface on there. It's kind of hard to reach in there, so I'm going to take this glue from my other tails and put a little bit inside there. Flip it over. And I'll do the same with this side. Sorry. talk with a piece of veneer in your mouth. Okay. Alright. The same with this other side. So set that little piece of veneer somewhere where it's not going to get in the way. Now I'm going to start with the tenon started without any glue. Keep in mind we're going to wedge this tenon. So that's going to help sort of increase our mechanical advantage. So I need to hit this home a little bit. I'll use my wood mallet for that. And I generally want to avoid beating on my stock. So what I'm going to use is a block and hit the block rather than my workpiece. Again. This home evenly. Obviously my tenon is sticking out the bottom a little bit, so as I start to hit the rest of this home, I'm going to leave that tenon hanging off the edge of my and bring most of this home before I put the clamps on it. So I'm close at this point, not all the way down. You can still see a few gaps here, but that's good for now. Looks like the shovers on my tenons are pretty close. I'll pull those in a little bit, but I think I'm ready to apply some clamp pressure. So the other thing you want to be careful about is these clamps. These are some old iron ones. I got about, I don't know, dozen and a half of these for like $100. So they're a good deal. A lot of people use the black pipe ones. You know, the black pipe ones, that coating on the pipe will leach off as it comes into contact with wet glue. So you definitely in that case don't want that pipe touching any glue surface, because you will have black marks on your glue piece, on your workpiece. Okay. Doing this by myself is a little more problematic. If we were in the shop, we could get someone to help us with this. So more hands make it a little bit easier. Okay. All right, that one's in place for now. Go ahead and put the other one in. And see the clamping fall is a little bit over, so I'm just going to tap it over. Okay. Get one more clamp. We need to pull the middle together. almost there. Yeah, got one or two, like I said, I wasn't careful enough about them, making sure there wasn't anything back in there, but I'll fix that after we glue it up. So one pin, I would be happy if it came just a little closer together, but I'll work with that later. Okay. Alright, so now I need to put the right pressure on the bottom of this just to bring my head and shoulders into this tape. Good there. Not too bad there. Okay. So, figure out which way to come out where. Use those two on inside. And these two on this side. I did cut an extra one. Okay. So. So hopefully you can see the end of the tenon there. Tilt this on its side. Okay. And it should make it a little bit easier to see. Alright. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on this business card. I don't want a whole lot of excess glue when I do this. Put a little bit of glue on my wedge. Once this is home, it doesn't require a tremendous amount of glue. Okay, now what I'm going to do is hit these home evenly. This one's sticking out a little bit further. So pound that one in. If we're listening carefully, what we should hear is by the time we get this home, the tone in this wedge should change a little bit. I'm doing this. And if you don't hear it change, don't worry so much. I'm just going to seat these all the way home. And we'll call it good. Okay. So now they're all the way home. What's happening with that wedge or the end of the tenon? It spread those apart. So now we have almost like a kind of a dovetail scenario going on in the end here. And I'll clean those up a little bit more once everything's dry. I'll go ahead and do the other side. But that's about it. So I'll leave it in the clamps maybe an hour, hour and a half, and then pull it apart. And you know, if I get any sort of glue squeeze out anywhere, let's see what I've got on the inside. Yep, inside looks clean. I didn't get any glue squeeze out there. things are looking pretty decent. So we'll call it good for that, and like I said, about an hour and a half, I'll pull out the clamps and we'll see what it looks like then.